You're listening to the Hey Sis podcast. This is a space for millennial women to breathe and then go out into the world and lead. Now, here's your host, Dr. Dee Evans.
Hello, everyone. Hey, ladies. It's Dr. Dee, and you are listening to the Hey Sis podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing the topic, the power in being fully you. If you've been listening to the Hey Sis podcast, you remember the episode on imposter syndrome. So in short, imposter syndrome is this occurrence when you doubt your skills, you begin to doubt your talents, your accomplishments. You have this crazy internalized fear of being successful or being exposed as a fraud. It's this crazy juxtapose of knowing you're good enough but not feeling like you should be good enough. And there's a cycle that happens with an imposter syndrome. Every time you try to take on the newness that God has given to you, every time you embark upon a new project or a new task, here comes this anxiety. Here comes this procrastination. And for many women, the self-sabotage comes with the over preparation, right? Then you complete the project, the task, or you do the thing that God has called you to do. And there's this moment of relief. It's usually pretty brief if you struggle with this imposter syndrome. And in that brief moment, you feel accomplished. You are like, dun, 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 dun. And then here comes the thoughts of rationalization. Oh my gosh, I was just lucky. Someone else would have done a better job. Oh my God, I missed this. This was a typo. Those thoughts start coming into your mind, and then you have the increase of self-doubt and anxiety, and then you feel like a fraud, and then we go back into let's begin a new project or a new task, and then you go back into the anxiety and the procrastination and the over preparation. Okay, that's typically what the cycle looks like. And that imposter syndrome cycle is lethal on the mind and on the spirit because you are trapped inside of your own body feeling like a fraud. A lot of high achieving women struggle with this because they're unable to accept who they are. They are unable to embrace their successes. They are unable to embrace their accomplishments, because it's hard for them to come to grips with the fact that all of who they are is enough. As sufficient as you may be, as worrisome as you may be, sis, you are enough. This podcast is primarily for millennial women who, at this age, we're in our 30s. Some of us millennials, I think, are in our 40s at this point. You've been through the breakups, sis. You've had the job loss by now, and you've had the relocation by now. Maybe some of you are settled in your career. You've gone from apartment hunting to now you're looking for your new house. Some of you have just given up the college car. Now you're moving on to your luxury vehicle. You're moving on up, honey. But adulting is not as fun as it seemed when we were all watching Disney Channel. That zoom, zoom, zoom made my heart go boom, boom. That Xenon the sequel. Life was so easy and different then, right? But now we are adults. And it's okay that we don't have it all figured out. We probably will never have it all figured out. But it is okay to be okay with who and where you are. There is a power in being fully you. The Lord is not anointing a version of you that you have constructed by taking the strengths of other people and wishing it into yourself. That's not how this works. The Lord anoints the insufficient you, the insecure you, the lustful you, the lying you. He anoints you knowing all of your stuff. He loves you. He's not a fan of that crazy stuff you do, but he loves you. And I preach the whole gospel of Jesus Christ. So we have to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We have to love our enemies. But sis, I am seeing a pattern. We are struggling with loving ourselves for who we are and what we are not. As a millennial woman, I can speak and attest to this pressure that I felt, especially being an African American woman from parents who were not afforded the same opportunities that they gave me. I thank God for my mom and dad who did things for me that could have never been offered to them just based on how they were raised, their socioeconomic status. And when I said I want to go to Spain, it was okay, Dee. When I said I want to live in Africa, they said, okay, Dee. And my mom and dad always told me we never even thought about going to Spain. We never even thought about living in Africa, but they put me in a private school. So my mind was so open. I was so cultured. I wanted more. And I'm so grateful that they allowed me to explore my intelligences and my strengths and my weaknesses. But when I got to my beloved HBCU, Winston-Salem State University, baby, there was a pressure to achieve. Not because I had not already arrived in the sense of being a Black woman that was entering into school. In my whole cohort of cousins at that time, I was the only one going to school. So it's not that I had not reached a plateau that should be celebrated. When I went to a HBCU, my professors told me, now that you're here, honey, you have to do well. You're Black. You have to do well. You're here. You have to do well. You are representing Black women that are coming after you. I can't remember that professor's name. Any of you that were in school at SU with me, you can email me the name of that professor. She was over there in RJR. There was a pressure to succeed from her that was just weird. And I think it created or planted the seed of imposter syndrome. Because I knew what I wasn't good at. I'm really not good in math. I'm not great in statistics at all. I think I failed that class. I'm not good at that. But it's this crazy space where you're overpraised and criticized at the same time. And it can make you feel like you're a fraud. When people tell you, oh my God, you're going to make it. You're so successful. Look what you've come from. Oh my gosh. And then you realize, oh my God, I'm not good in math. I'm decent with public speaking. I'm not going to be an athlete. My hair isn't long to my behind. I don't have long hair, don't care. I have medium hair. Okay. And all of these things matter. I know it's comical, but our internal dialogue is not based on science. It's based on feeling, right? And I can pinpoint the moments when I felt pressured to achieve, and that caused confusion, which led me to walking in a cycle of imposter syndrome for a long time, because I felt like I didn't belong because I was successful, because I was intelligent, because I was anointed. It's always this duality that's present that I've learned to embrace over time. And I had to learn that self-worth is not contingent upon achieving. Even though society, our churches, our jobs, there's a pressure to achieve. You've got to meet quota. You've got to do this. You have to get along with the boss. You have to get along with the teacher's pet, right? And because of this pressure, there's a lot of confusion between approval and love and worthiness, to the extent that self-love becomes contingent upon achieving. And other factors that boost the odds is that you feel like a phony. You feel like you don't belong because you are more aware of your failures than anyone else. You are more aware of your crap than anyone else. As a Black woman, I was taught that I had to work twice as hard to be half as good. And that instilled in me this goal-oriented approach that I always had to do well. But it also taught me that I was never going to do well enough. A lot of African Americans and Latino Americans, they experience imposter syndrome because we are, in a lot of America's minds, social degenerates, not just minority, but like a disease, right? And my interests, what I wanted, what I represented was different than my white colleagues, my Anglo-Saxon colleagues, my Euro-American colleagues, whatever you want to call yourself, okay? Y'all already know I don't have a prejudice bone in my body or a racist bone in my body, but we got to talk about race, gender, sexual orientation, and all of that can actually fuel a sense of being a fraud, but we'll get to that maybe another podcast. But what I wanted, what I represented was different than my white colleagues. And some of you professional ladies of color can attest to the fact that most of your contingency, most of your conflict in the workplace comes from either white males that have this superiority complex that's completely misplaced, or it comes from other white women who are completely insecure and trying to understand why you got it. Or sadly, it's from other women of color who look at you and are upset that they can't be you because they're uncomfortable with being yourself or being themselves. Does that make sense? With all that going on in a workplace, all that going on in school, this is the same battle. You know, you have it when you're in high school. You have it when you're in college. You have it when you're in the workplace. I feel like it's a constant battle to just be okay with the skin that you're in, with the hair that you've been given, with the intelligences that you have. It's a lot. You've paid a hefty price to be here, sis. That's why I emphasize to you all, own who you are because you've been through so much just to accept the fact that who you are is okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be second best. You have to be you. And the power in that is being able to say, look, I might not be as smart as my CEO. I might not be as articulate as my coworker to my left. I may not be as funny as the coworker on my right. I might not be aesthetically appealing as my mother in her youth. I might not be as slim as my best friend that gets all the attention. I may not be the European version of beauty because of my size and my hair and the way that my nose is shaped or my shoe size or my interest. Maybe I walk a little bit more in the masculine than other women. And maybe I'm hyper feminine to the point I'm dependent upon men in a way that's unhealthy. All of those things make you you. They don't make you perfect. They make you you. The moment you stop trying to be someone else in an attempt to make you better is when you'll realize that the Holy Spirit is not trying to make you be anybody else but yourself. The role of us being followers of Jesus Christ is not to copy other disciples. It's to become like the one who we call Abba. It's to become more like him, his likeness, his personality, his ways, his love. I'll never be Jesus Christ. I don't care how saved I become, how mature I become. But as I look at him or look upon him, behold him, his eyes like fire, his feet like burnished bronze, I begin to love like him. And I love like him through being fully me. The way Jesus shows love or showed love in plenty of the Gospels was his way of sitting and eating and fellowshipping with people. I didn't see Jesus do it. I just read about it. I can't mimic it completely because, there's a lot of cultural factors here that may prohibit that. But I can love like him the best way I know how, by being fully me. Maybe you have a gluten allergy and you can't break bread and drink wine. But maybe you can't eat guacamole and some chips with your sister and chop it up and encourage one another and be fully you. I want to encourage you, ladies, the ones of the women that are listening that have been accused of being a perfectionist, of obsessing over the details, of being too much. I want to encourage you to stop striving for someone to see you and say, you're enough. Let the striving cease right here. Not because I'm telling you that you're enough, but because the Lord has already decreed that everything he makes is perfect. He saw you before you knew who you were, and he said it was good. To the woman that is struggling with finding herself because everyone else knows her failures. Aren't we in a cancel culture? If you make one bad decision, baby, you will be a topic on all social media platforms. For instance, let me give you an example. Dante Bowe, he used to sing with Maverick City. I love his cover of Come Alive, Come Alive, Come Alive, Dry Bones. That song. Anyway, something happened. Maverick City said, hey, we don't fool with him no more. We don't agree with what he put there. We love him, but we can't have that. Okay. For the women that have experienced public humiliation the same way he has, I want you to remember that no one can sit in a seat of judgment against you, because the Lord will never change his mind about you. Even though he went through public humiliation, even though you have gone through public humiliation, and maybe that has brought shame and discouragement, and maybe it has caused your reputation to be shattered, I want you to know that you need to own it, because it's part of who you are. I had a group coaching session recently because I'm in the middle of a group coaching program that I'm teaching called Blueprint. I'm guiding some ladies through a 4-week journey of discovery and securing the future. Something the Lord told me to do. If you're interested, go to the deevansgroup.com. Shameless plug. Nevertheless, I'm in this group coaching program with these ladies, and I'm guiding them. And our guest speaker gives us this amazing testimony of how she came out of cheating on her husband. The husband cheated on her with somebody else. And she went through all this suicide, all this depression. And she's in this place of exiting the wilderness. And now she helps other women find that place of peace and serenity. And hearing her testimony, I'm like, oh my gosh. But when I look at her tell the ugly parts of her life, I see the joy. I see how she owns every ugly part of her story, and she stands in her truth, and she says, this is me. And even if you don't like me, I understand, because at one point I didn't like me. But I'm standing here to tell you, ladies, that the Lord loves me and he loves you. Sis, if you're facing shame and guilt and public humiliation, you need to rest in the fact that the Lord has not changed his mind concerning you. For those of you perfectionists, the Lord will not change his mind concerning you if you mess up, if you miss a detail, if you arrive late. His love is not based on works. He just loves the way you giggle. He made you like that. You bring him joy. That's something to sleep on tonight, knowing that the Lord just doesn't love you. He likes you. But after you sleep on that, asking the Holy Spirit to give you the roadmap, to give you the grace, to give you the power to love who you are fully. Sis, I want you to realize that nobody's perfect. Sis, I want you to reframe the way you think about your achievements. I want you to pray about the way you view help. You don't have to be sick to ask for help. Therapy is helpful, but for many ladies, it's necessary. It's a part of your regimen. It's a part of your routine. It's nothing wrong with needing help to break a cycle. It's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. It's a blessing to be able to recognize that, hey, I need assistance in order for me to be my best self. Not because I'm trying to be like this person, not because I'm trying to be like that person, but because the old D needs to stay in the past and the new D needs to emerge. And in order to ensure that the old D stays crucified to the flesh, I've got to make sure that I fall in love with the woman that I fought so hard to be. When you embrace your individuality, you realize that your individuality changes and seeps into every aspect of your life. Make sure you're in a community of people that make you feel like you are enough by being yourself. You don't need to talk softer. You don't need to talk louder. You don't need to do any of that. You need to be around people that love you even if you don't change. Especially my ladies that are listening that have disabilities. That's your uniqueness. I know I've always had a stuttering problem, which is why it's so funny that God calls me to preach. I have to think about the words that I say sometimes. When I'm preaching, I don't. It just comes out. But that's what makes me unique. It's funny that he would call this girl who struggles with her speech and her diction to preach, to have a podcast of all things. But I own me. I say certain words funny. I can't say certain words. I'm not as articulate as other individuals, but I am me. And even with my mistakes, you listening to this podcast, because you know I have something to say. This community brings value to your life. There's something unique that I bring to you that no one else can bring. And so when I show up, when I record these, when I plan out what I'm going to say, it is me stepping into my purpose, but it is also me loving who I am enough to say, God, thank you for using me. Now, you could have used anybody else. No, it is me, God. You've always chosen me. Help me to help these women walk fully in who they are, so that when they show up for the next woman, when they walk fully in who they are, that they can be more impactful than they ever thought or imagined. Celebrate your uniqueness. Embrace your individuality, because you deserve to be here. It is a process. Some days you're going to wake up beaming with confidence. And other days you may need to lean on the scriptures. You might need to pull out your phone and do some guided meditation to clear your thoughts. You may need to call your life coach. You may need to call the best friend that you know can pray you out of anything. But no matter what, the most important thing to remember is that the Lord made you uniquely you. And he doesn't look at you and go, "Ooh, you need to do better with that. Oh, you should have done this better." He looks at you and smiles because you are exceptional the way that you are. I want to thank you for listening to this episode on the power of being fully you. And I want to encourage you to share this. Send it in your text thread to a friend, your cousin that needs to hear this. And send me a message. contact@thedeevans.com. I would love to hear from you, especially if you have comments or any concerns. Until we meet again, hey sis.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Hey Sis podcast. Check out www.thedeevans.com for more blogs and motivation.